welcome to It Happened on the Job. We can't figure out what episode we're on. It's either 19 or 20, so when you're listening to this, help us out a little bit.
They'll see it. It will say the number of the episode.
Yeah.
And then they'll say that those guys are idiots.
We'll sound real silly at this point. This is our podcast for conversations with contractors that sometimes get a little bit entertaining and hopefully they're somewhat relatable. Our guest today is Joe Larson, with Salt Safety Training, and obviously formerly in the business quite a bit, but I'll let him kind of go into that. Joe, welcome. We thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no worries. So tell us a little bit kind of how you got started in the industry, the journey or the road to where you are now and what you're doing now. And we'll kind of go from there.
That's a long road.
The great thing about these is that they're not timed, right? We're not like on a 30-second slot on TV or anything. So we got all we got is time.
All right. Well, I've been in the business since the 80s. I was I don't know how you dub me, a problem teenager. I didn't complete high school, so I got into the trades early as a sophomore. It bounced around a little bit in the beginning to try and get a feel for what I liked, for what I enjoyed. And the cool thing about the industry is that there's a lot of different options. You know what I mean? There's no reason to do drywall your whole.
Go down there. Yep.
Oh yeah, for sure. If you hate drywall, why do it? I mean, there's 50 other trades that may be more suitable to you. And then ultimately, at that time, I got into ceramic tile because we had family friends that were in the business, and financially, it was able to better provide for me. They had an impromptu apprenticeship. And one of the older brothers would kind of take you in and run you through the deal. And it was funny. He's a super conservative, red-blooded American. Don't bring any tools that aren't made in the USA on my job site, yada, yada. And he would point you to say, hey, go do that. Of course, I'd grab his tool to go do it. And he would say, what are you doing? Well, you told me to do this. Well, you can't use my tools. So then, of course, that night I would end up going to this place called Marvell Supply over in Phoenix, and I'd buy that tool that, of course, he never would let me use again. But I wanted to make sure that I had the tool for whatever task it was. And, while it was happening, it was frustrating. But what he was doing was getting me to where I had a full inventory of tools. So pretty much at any task that came up, I was suited to do it. And then it's a little tough to learn the tile trade on payroll. It's tough. I think that's for all contractors. It's tough to help an employee make that transition while you're paying. It's a tough commitment to make, especially when you're an independent tile contractor. You've only got 2 employees. It becomes rather expensive. So Mike Jarvinen, who was the guy that was putting me through the training, started putting me out on side jobs, and he'd get a referral that would come in, and he would say, take this job, and I would go do a little bathroom floor or something where it was my time and my dollars. So if it took me a month to make $100, it was 100% on me. But at the same time, I was learning some of the other skills that I was unable to learn with him. And then his final lesson was sending me to a guy that he knew would have trouble paying. And of course, the guy he stiffed me on the end of it. And then Mike said, well, come on, I'll go help you collect. And he was a little more barbaric than my style, but we got a paycheck out of him.
Guido with a bat.
Oh my goodness. And the guy's, super, super nice guy until he comes in court. But here's this little 5'6" tile setter just absolutely going nuts. And this guy's entryway with a hammer smashing tile. I'm going to keep beating stuff up until you get us I'll get you a check. Oh no, we're not taking checks. It's, and that's never been me. I've never been able to employ that type of, I have to be a little more diplomatic because I'm not that squirrely, but it was a pretty interesting. And he was like, yeah, I knew that was guy was you're going to have trouble getting paid. And I was like, why did you refer me to him? And he's like, well, because you got to learn that part of the business too.
Yeah.
Like it's not just about putting work in place. You got to get paid for it as well. So then my lesson was just to completely avoid people like that because it's just not my style. But anyway, so then I in 86 to 90, I did a short stint in the Navy here, stationed in San Diego. I had
thank you for your service.
Well, thank you very much. It was, man, I wish I'd have put as much into it as I got out of it. You know, serving our country is a cool thing, but man, the benefits that you get on the other side just completely put me back on the rails. I had an instructor in Phoenix who was also the principal, and you guys are probably too young for the cop show Beretta, but he was like the Beretta, little Irish Catholic guy that was just, you know, came into class every day with a 3-piece suit on and a tie, and he was squirrely. And I walked in the first day of class, and I was going to a continuation school, 18-year-old sophomore. I walked in, he said, "Sit down, shut up. You sit down, shut up." Split my best friend and I apart, and then just proceeded to own me, and really forced a lot out of me. Forced a lot of decisions, forced a lot of thought. Super caring, super compassionate guy. And at continuation school, you've either got a drug problem or a baby. You know, it was kind of the two groups that were in there. There was nobody, you know. And then I had one friend that I met going to school there that was, his issue was the regular high school didn't move fast enough, but he was definitely, you know, an anomaly. The rest of us all were battling issues. And then I decided at 18 I was going to go to the junior college because it's like, this is stupid. You know, I'm not even done for my sophomore year, and all my friends are going to the JC. I can get a GED, and I can just make the transition. And why waste the 2 years here? I could be 2 years further ahead the other way. And there was a paperwork issue that I had to square away. And Mr. Murphy said, "Hey, let me take you to lunch first." And he sits me down across the table at lunch and said, "Are you out of your mind?" Like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Look, there's no doubt you're smart enough." He's like, "But you have the study habits of a second grader. You're going to walk in, and this guy's going to babble at you for an hour, and then you're going to come back the next day and be tested on it." It's like, you don't have to take notes. You don't have to. It's like, this is a really, really bad decision for you. You know, I'm going to have to really discourage you. And of course, you know, I wanted no part of the discouragement. And he was, you know, he suggested that I look into the military. He said, "I can get you out of Phoenix. It'll get you into a better, you know, you'll have more of a chance than what you have here." And I don't claim to be extremely intelligent, but I am smart enough to take good advice. And I left, and it just kept eating at me. And I was like, man, this guy's the first educator that knew me, you know, and really forced so much learning and so much, self-observation. He's telling me don't go to school. I was like, well, this is interesting. I got the best teacher I've ever had telling me don't go to school. And long story short, I ended up joining the service, completely altered the course of my life or where I was headed, because I was able to break that cycle and get out of that, you know, that group who's all,
yeah,
you know, none of those people in that crowd are doing very well today if they're still with us. So it was a huge deal. And then so I spent 4 years in the service. When I wrapped up my stint, I was stationed on board the USS Constellation in Philadelphia, working for the training department, and I was coordinating all the new sailors coming on board and getting all their PPE squared away and getting all their training certifications up to date. And that was kind of my introduction, I guess, to training.
Right.
And then I got back into ceramic tile when I got out, spent a few years doing that. And then, believe it or not, I'm old enough to have been through a couple of recessions, and we were in the middle of a recession and there was no work to be had. And we were really, really struggling in the tile trade to try and, you know, keep food on the table. And I had a neighbor that was working for PCL Civil Constructors on a project in San Diego. And he was like, "Hey, you know, we need laborers." And I was like, "No, I don't want to do that. I'm a journeyman. I don't want to go back being a laborer." And he was like, "Well, you know, it's prevailing wage and it's a couple of year project." And going from ceramic tile, we were doing a 3-wall tub enclosure in a day, to hearing a couple of years, it was like, wow, that's an incredible amount of freedom. At least from the job stresses of worried about, you know, the network and what am I going to do tomorrow. So I made the transition, ended up falling in love with the work because it's so varied. You know, in the underground industry or the heavy civil industry, one day you're making grade, one day you're pouring concrete, one day you're doing pipe installs, mechanical. It's a pretty varied trade. on the labor side. So you're doing and you're doing everything from the technical work where you're putting a piece of mechanical piping together to just grunt labor work where you're stacking rock bags, and you've got that whole variance in between. And it worked really well for me because it gave me a lot of variety, kept me from getting stale.
Yeah, a lot of exposure to different things too. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was their PCO was a good company to work for. They had a really strong safety culture, so we were able to go to work and come home every day in one piece with all our fingers and toes, and which is important in our industry.
It's one of those good benefits to have at a job.
Yeah, and it's one of those deals that you don't even realize when you're in it until you look back and you realize, wow, those guys really had it.
Right.
Really had it figured out. Our safety director was in Tempe, Arizona. And he was able to manage our safety culture here being 350 miles away. And it's just incredible with that as an adult or as an older adult looking back on, wow, what a feat to be able to keep that kind of safety culture intact when you're that far removed from the day-to-day operations. But we were good at it. So PCL left town, and I went to work for a small contractor up in North County, San Diego, and we did sewer, water, storm drain, dry utilities, grading, and I started on as a superintendent for him, and then was with him for a handful of years. He taught me how to estimate, brought me into the office, and did everything old school. He was incredible. The guy could look at a set of plans for about 2 seconds and come within a couple $1,000s of the number that I would come back with on the utilities. And I was just like, why do you put me through it? And he's like, well, because you have to, before you can put it together in your head, you have to learn the processes. And he was that guy that got up on Sunday morning and looked at what was happening with commodities and looked at where the oil markets were going. And then he would use that information, the oil markets, to estimate his pricing on where the PVC pipe was headed. Just an incredible, like a fifth grade education. That guy's just incredibly intelligent. So anyway, I learned a lot of that piece from him, a lot of the operational side. Then I moved into land development, worked for K. Hovnanian for a few years before the market crashed the last time. Managed a big project over in Scottsdale for Kitchell Contractors. So my career, I've been pretty lucky to bounce around a little bit without being too much. Nothing like looking at a resume and every 3 months, they've got a new deal. But it's so I've had some pretty good runs, but at the same time, it's given me a lot of exposure to different things, and kind of learned a lot about me and what my strengths are, and what where my skill sets are best suited.
Right.
And I was able to, when I went to manage that project for them in Scottsdale, and I was able to find Thomas Murphy, and sit down and reconnect with him and take him to lunch this time and return the favor and learn about his history and how after I left and joined the service, he had authored a book called Smart Learn, and I ended up traveling the country promoting his book and doing pretty well with that. And I said, you know what, Tom, someday I'm going to find a way to pay this back to you, because what you did for me on a personal level is incredible. And I've done a little bit of stuff. I've done some work with the TPP Workability Group, which is high school students that are most likely going to get a certificate of completion and not a diploma, and varying levels of learning disabilities, from full-on nonverbal autistic all the way through. And just met some really, really, really sweet kids that are not looking at construction as a career because of what they've seen their parents and families go through with the recessions. Trying to encourage these folks, hey, people that are smart and have the ability to learn can go into construction, do this, and it doesn't necessarily have to translate to a math test or an English and grammar test. You can use your smarts in another deal. So I started with that, and then kind of accidentally slid into the Association of General Contractors through the apprenticeship program. We were looking at signing up with Schilling Paradise when I was the ops manager with Schilling. And one of my employees saw the paperwork on my desk. He was like, "Oh man, don't do it. The instructors are horrible. You know, they're really struggling because they've only got a couple of guys. And so they've got a carpenter that's covering underground, that's covering carpenter, that's covering concrete. And they just don't have the specific skill sets in these areas." So when I went and followed up with a guy by the name of Charles Hinkles, who's now up in Chino, running an apprenticeship up there, and I said, "Hey, Charles, you know, the feedback I'm getting is not super solid." He's like, "Yeah, it's because I can't find anybody to do it." He's like, "Unless you're willing to step up to the plate." I was like, "I'm absolutely willing to step up to the plate." And that kind of started it was about 7 years ago, and that kind of started a change in direction for me, because I walked into the classroom and realized I've been okay at a lot of things that I've done, but I'm better as a teacher than I am as anything else that I've ever kind of taken on. It just flowed supernatural. It took a lot less effort for me to get to that spot, and I enjoy watching somebody learn and put it together, and you realize, man, I'm teaching somebody personal life skill that they're going to be able to go out and they can read a tape measure now. They can read, and it's incredible to me how the school systems have changed, and how in a classroom of 35 apprentices, 34 of them have no idea how to read a tape measure, and it's never been introduced to them. And we've really, because of the shift away from the shop classes in the industrial arts programs, and the way math is handled in the school system.
Yeah, they just have no clue. Yeah,
no clue at all. And so I've you know, as I put a little timeline together for myself, I wrote the Joe Larson instructor story, which my wife says is too long to share with anybody. So I just kind of kept it for. It's like nobody's going to squeeze it down to a paragraph. Nobody's going to read 3 pages. Nobody cares. But I was reading through there, and I was thinking back to some of the stories and some of the different aspects of my life where I've been an instructor that wasn't paid, but that just came natural to me. And I've got a really good friend that grew up in Tijuana, and we worked together doing ceramic tile, and just became super, super, super good friends over the years. And we were working together one day, and he just kept screwing cuts up. Like it was over and over and over, and I was losing my mind. And how many times am I going to send him out with a piece of tile and have it come back in to be the wrong size? And he was just having one of those days. He was having an off day, and learning from him and him explaining to me the Mexican or the Spanish perspective on our measuring system. And he in his mind, 5/8 was a name. It wasn't a fractional location on it. Right. It was an 8, and 1/8 was like each spot on a tape measure had a name. So it was all by sheer memorization. And we're sitting down, and he's got hearing issues in one ear, and when we were younger, he was pretty shy. So him and I would sit at lunchtime together and exchange. He would help me on my Spanish, and I would help him on his English. But he'd never had the confidence to say, "Hey, I don't understand what you're telling me." So I grab a piece of paper and a pencil, and I draw a tape measure out and draw an inch out and break it into pieces. And he was like, "Are you kidding me?" I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Pinchy gringos, why would you break something into 12 pieces and then break that into 16 pieces? Like, it's totally irrational. It absolutely doesn't makes no sense." He's like, "Now I see it, and I see it's 3/4. It's 3 of 4 parts of an inch." He's like, I can see now that you're explaining it to me, and I understand that that's a fraction." He was just between the language barrier was just enough that he wasn't wrapping his head around it. And then when he finally realized what it meant, I can vividly remember that look on his face, like, "You guys are insane." He was like, "I grew up on the metric system. You multiply by 10, you divide by 10
right
on everything. And I can add it in my head. I can do it. I don't have to have, And it's pretty interesting, because I've fallen back to that over the years and realized, this is a difficult concept for somebody who's never been exposed to it. And I've got a little presentation that I drug onto my website that I use for teaching the apprentices on how to read a tape measure, kind of where measurement comes from and why the increments are so odd and weird. And it basically comes from when we had, the length of a man's belt. Okay, that's a yard. And men were similarly sized. And then an inch was the length of a thumb from the knuckle down. And I knew that I'd picked it up from my German grandmother, telling me all this, and she had her way of measuring when she'd go fit you for clothes, she'd wrap your pants around your neck and say, "Oh yeah, that'll fit around your waist," and she had all kinds of goofy.
Wow.
But I didn't realize that's where it came from.
Right.
And so many pieces of barley, 4 pieces of barley fit into an inch, and it's just, and you read the whole history of how the measurements came together based on what we had when we were first started, the imperial measurements. So anyway, I stumbled into the teaching thing, the instructing thing, and in the beginning, my wife was like, "I can't believe you're going to spend 2 nights a week away from the house. We've got all this stuff going on, and we've got kids." And within a couple of weeks, she was like, "Hey, you're signing up for next session, right?" Because it had such a and I think I gave her a little bit of peace being out of the house, and the other side of it was it brought the best that I have to offer.
Yeah, some fulfillment out of you. Yeah.
So it was just like, wow, this is, I'm spending, instead of spending 90% of your day in stuff that you're not good at, let's find a way to spend 90% of your day in stuff that you are good at. So which is, we kind of set the trajectory, and hey, how are we going to be able to make this transition so that we can. Yeah,
now you don't have to be the guy beating down doors waiting for checks anymore either.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and man, for the number of good contractors that there are, and the number of the industry is just filled with truly, truly good people, hardworking people that like to watch stuff go from concept up out of the ground into a functional, building or a utility line or a bridge or whatever it is that we're constructing on that project. There's a lot of super good people in the business, but unfortunately it's salted with the people like every business has that are just absolutely there for the dollar. And, nothing like having a contract argument with somebody who's found a way to make $10 off you that has nothing to do with the project being being built. But, I don't know, our industry as a whole has got a bunch of real handy, helpful people. And I think the last 5 or 10 years, the shift to women in the industry has been pretty significant. And it's cool because it's opening us up to another perspective and another set of skill sets. And it's kind of cool to see the industry being a little more open arms, a little more diverse, versus the good old boy network that construction used to be so, predominant.
Yeah, we've actually had a couple women that we've interviewed so far, and I think one more next week that we're doing. So it's like you said, it's good to see, that different perspective. Yeah. It's definitely a different style, different, perspective, outlook, all that kind of stuff on the industry. That's fresh and new, and it's good to have it out there.
Well, and the DPR, has got a gal by the name of Mary Bubach. That's an incredible project manager. She's super detail oriented, super analytical, can keep the emotions at bay. Let's deal with what's there, because unfortunately in a male dominated industry, a lot of the times the emotions come in and that whole testosterone of, I just have to win.
Right.
Can be really problematic for a project. It's at the end of the day, we're not there to win. We're there to build projects. And it was really, really awesome. I did a project with her in San Diego, or at least started, and she ended up moving to another project. But it was so interesting to work with her, and so intelligent, so smart. And I look back and I think, man, how many years did the network try and keep women out of the business? We probably should have been encouraging. Hey, come on, Joe. We talk about labor shortages, and I listening to a few of your podcasts, it seems to be a trend. What about the labor shortage, and what are you doing for labor? And one of the things we're not doing is encouraging some diversity.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, I think it's going that way, but for a long time, obviously it was kind of taboo, but I think it's pushing that way, or it's at least becoming a little bit more inclusive and a little bit more top of mind for a lot of contractors, especially the newer ones. As some of I think we're kind of at a transition point right now where there's a lot of the older, kind of more experienced guys in the industry, and then you've got a lot of younger guys coming in right now too, that are working their way through management. So I think that hopefully, that just gets more and more popular as we move on.
Yeah, well, when I got into the business in the 80s, it was really, really, really segregated, and tile setters were really hard on the Hispanic community on what they would allow them to do within the trade, because they didn't want to, the white males did not want to lose the dominance over the over the trade. And now to be instructing a class and you look out and there's females, blacks, Hispanics, Asians in the classroom, and the cool thing is there's no clusters. So everybody's just sitting there, all just people sitting there doing the class. It's just, I don't know, a pretty significant change. And I've seen a big shift in the last 7 years from the African-American group being more populous in the classrooms. And it's good. We talk about the lack of bodies, and then you drive through some of the neighborhoods and you say, well, you can't tell me there's nobody in this neighborhood that wants to work. Because it's a neighborhood that's different than your demographic does not mean that there's not able bodies here. And how do we reach out? And there's a we figured out the English-Spanish language barrier, but there's another barrier that I think that we need to break, and that's the Asian. There's a cultural language barrier there, even if everybody's speaking English, and it's prompted by. I grew up with a shop at the house. My neighbor to the right of me did framing. The neighbor across the street was a firefighter. The one down at the corner was a general contractor. We had tile setters and drywallers, and that was just our neighborhood in Phoenix. So when somebody said, go get a putty knife, or somebody said, go get a drywall saw, or somebody said, in our neighborhood, the kids would scramble because we all knew what it was.
Right.
So then you go into a community whose past generation or previous generation was not in construction, and their uncles didn't do construction and their dads didn't do construction. You ask for that same tool, you don't get the same response.
Right.
So there's a language barrier there that's just created by exposure, and it seems like it's a big thing to help us get past that. That's why the apprenticeship is so cool, because we get to bring that language to anybody that's interested in learning. They indenture through the program and come in, and then we get to talk to them.
So you're doing that apprenticeship program through the AGC? Is that how it's working? They're recruiting?
So the apprenticeship program is through the AGC, and it's open to anybody with a high school diploma. Pretty much, urinalysis and that kind of stuff they're working through, but most of those are employer mandated pieces. But it's just, the awesome thing about it is I'm not on a time clock. So if it takes me 100 times for Mike Fisher to understand what I'm trying to explain to him, there's no money lost. So we can just keep going over it until you go, thumbs up, yeah, I got it. Yeah, I got to go ahead and move on. Whereas that kind of stuff in the field's pretty hard. And unfortunately, when a lot of foremen are once, twice stupid. Right. And so once they get to the third go around, they badge it as, oh, he's never going to figure that out. We had a student in math that was working for a large underground contractor, and he'd had encephalitis when he was a kid, so he had suffered some brain damage. And he was a hard-working man. The kid would just come filthy sweat rings down his shirt. You knew he was out there just working as hard as he could every day. When it came to the math stuff, man, he was really struggling. He'd do one or two problems, and you could literally walk around his table and come back, and he had that blank look on his face. And you, okay, I'm all the way back at zero again. He's completely walked after he's done a couple of problems. And there's a instructor that I co-teach with that's a full-time instructor down at Southwestern College in San Diego, and he was like, hey, you just got to be consistent with him because of that brain damage he had when a kid. It's just going to take a little while to get it to sink in. Well, when he'd look up and give me the thumbs up, hey, I got it, it had crossed the threshold. It was now permanently in there. And he would never tell me he had it until he fully had it locked in. But I watched him learn how to read grade stakes. I watched him learn how to do multiply and divide fractions. It was over we do 2 8-week programs, and at the end of the 16 weeks, any of the math related to our trades, he could do. And it was one of those, probably the most rewarding thing I've done in my career was to see and realized, okay, well now he's got options. If he chooses to be in a labor intensive deal because he likes the physical side of the business, he can do it. But if he also wants to get in a little bit, on the math side, he wants to check grade or do something that's a little less physical, he's now got the skills to go do it. And it's just the program's pretty neat for that. The unfortunate thing about the program is there's not enough. There's not enough volume of classes for that to sustain me. So last July, we were celebrating my wife's 50th birthday, and I got some pressure to, hey man, you better make this jump and go instruct full time, or you're going to have on your headstone shoulda, woulda, coulda. And I was like, and it was funny when it was said, and then you realize, oh man, that's pretty accurate. I don't know what I'm waiting to have transpire. And I originally thought, hey, I'll go instruct or teach at a school district. I can go get my teaching credential. I can do that, and I'll wait till my daughter graduates and not wait. But the way the school districts handle the Social Security doesn't really pencil out to go from private to public because of what you give up on the Social Security side. So it's like, okay, that's probably not the right route. And I got lucky. There's an instructor out at Valley Center who made the same transition. He was a contractor, fell in love with teaching, went and got his credential, and he was like, man, look at the Social Security side, because I didn't. And I didn't realize after 3 years of teaching, he's like, man, my Social Security, my projected payment has dropped so much. It's like, I got to work 15 years at the school district just to get back to even. He was kind of hoping he was hoping to stack his retirements, be able to get a pension from the school district at the same time the Social Security. So anyway, we decided to stick with the private side, and then the stars kind of aligned to pick up a certification or two and start teaching some certification classes, and then kind of the snowball effect. I've just been able to build on it.
So right now you're doing the apprenticeship stuff with the AGC, and then you're doing private safety stuff and with just anybody who can find you, right? From a contractor standpoint.
Exactly. So I do some independently, and then I also the Association of General Contractors has two legs. We've got the chapter, and then the apprenticeship trust. So I instructed the apprenticeship trust, and then I've also started working for the chapter. So that's there's a lot of chapter members in San Diego, and then they'll advertise saying, hey, we've got a combined space or trenching and shoring glass or whatever it is coming up. And then you can reach out and sign up.
Yeah. So because of your previous history, is that all you're doing is the confined space and the trenching and shoring and those kind of safety issues classes? Yeah, I'm doing confined space, trenching and shoring, rigging and signal person. I've done an EM 385 course or two. I'm working on the OSHA 500, which will allow me to teach the OSHA 10 and the OSHA 30. But unfortunately, they keep rescheduling because of the COVID deal. And I had to swap my schedule around in support of an initiative I was working on, and unfortunately, I set myself up to have to miss that course. But that'll free me up for the OSHA 10 and the OSHA 30, and then I also do operator certifications for skid steer, loader, and excavator. They're, depending on how you interpret the EM 385, which is the safety governing document for the bases. Some will interpret that as every operator has to be certified in every piece of equipment that they operate. So when that comes up, we'll do a certification, and it's not we don't teach them how to operate. And that's not my skill set. I came through the labor side, but we do a safety walk around, a pre-operation inspection, have them grab the book, and then they go through a basic skills assessment just to make sure that they're safe when they get on that piece of equipment. Very cool. So are you staying pretty busy on the private side? Or how are guys finding you?
It's actually been busier than I expected. So when the apprenticeship stopped their instruction because of the COVID response, and we weren't online and we didn't have that component figured out. In the beginning, it was a little bit of shock, like everybody that gets that phone call. And then I realized, oh no, this is a great opportunity because it's going to be some time to work on the business instead of in the business and get some stuff done. And that really hasn't materialized. There's been plenty to do. The AGC has rolled their training through the chapter out in a Zoom format, and I've done a class through the Zoom format, and now they're scheduling our class to be on Zoom. So any place that we can run through, and we're working on the physical component on the, how are we going to work on the performance of the skill sets. And I'm currently putting together some curriculum for training on the COVID-19, because there's a mandate that came out from City of San Diego that every site has to have, and every site has to have a COVID trained designated supervisor on site. So I'm currently writing that curriculum now. I hope to be done with that tomorrow so we can start rolling that out next week.
That's cool.
And occasionally you get the panic. And luckily I think I told you that my LinkedIn profile was pretty out of date, and I jumped on last night to get it more current. And I realized, man, that's a huge network, because I've already picked up a little bit of business from people that know what I do. So, they get in a pinch. Hey, inspector, I'm stopped. I got to have these certifications by the Monday. Can you do it? And one of my goals is to maintain flexibility. From being on that side of the business for 37 years, I get it. And sometimes we can project and say, oh yeah, by August 1st, I'm going to have these 3 check boxes plugged in. Well, those are super easy to manage 2 and 4. It's those ones that come up when you're in the field and it just stops you dead in your tracks. So I try to be real empathetic to that component. So when the call comes in, I can drop what I have going on and make sure they're accommodated. Because at the end of the day, if we can't build it, the safety training is not really going to have any value.
Right.
We're just making them safe so that we can build.
Yeah. I know you mentioned that the AGC is transferred online. I guess I'm kind of curious, and maybe, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but have you been able to transfer any of the private stuff that you're doing online? And if so, is that allowing you to, as you kind of look to the future, maybe look into being able to expand beyond Southern California and say, hey, I can do this now that I've
absolutely
found this way to do this. I can go to Northern California or to Arizona or whatever, and still without having to travel as much. Is that something that's
absolutely. I've got a family friend who pushed really hard to get me into an online format, and he's a pretty entrepreneurial guy. He's an MBA. He's had his fair share of business exposure, and he's a good sounding board for me. And his wife is the coordinator out of Valley Center School District, or one of the couple of coordinators that helped transition Valley Center schools onto an online format. And she kept bugging me, when are you going to do this? When are you going to do this? You're limiting your market. I was into this old school, really limiting mindset of, well, no, because the skills, and I have to squeeze the clay, and I have to, I have to see them do it, and I have to, and I basically put myself in this box. And she was like, you're going to get behind this thing, and people are transitioning, you're not going to have it done. And then you're going to be, and I'm going to say, I told you so. I'm telling you, if the elementary schools can do it, you can do it as well. And I sat down on my computer 15 minutes after having that phone call, and there was a message: we're shifting 100% of our training to an online format. If anybody can do it. And I realized at that moment, if I don't say yes, somebody's going to.
Yeah.
And what was an opportunity today? Yeah. All of a sudden, it's, today it's an opportunity. Tomorrow it's a closed door because you didn't respond. So I called her friend back and said, Tammy, help. Apparently I need to do this
Well, that's what's funny about this thing, man, is as brutal as it's been, and as shocking as it was in those first couple of weeks where everybody just kind of went, what do we do now? I feel like it's forced so many people that, whether they were, of the old school mindset or not, maybe just comfortable. There's a number of different reasons why they were the way they were before this, but I feel like it's forced so many different people in so many different industries, and especially in construction, to advance so far, not only technologically, but from a safety standpoint, and just become a lot more progressive with a lot of that stuff. And And I mean, ultimately, I think obviously there's some capital that has to be spent when you make those transitions and are, adjusting those systems inside your business. But I think ultimately down the road, it's going to make a lot of people a lot more profitable and a lot more streamlined, having been through what we're going through right now.
Yeah, definitely exercising that creative part of our brain and how to.
For sure.
Well, and I realize too I enjoy exercising that creative muscle, and it's just one place that you can bring it in. And the whole online, being able to teach in other states was scary in the beginning, because I was like, oh yeah, well that means the guy from Des Moines can teach classes here as well. So it could potentially dilute our market with more instructors. And then I realized, if I can just maintain the quality at the level that I'm capable of, then it kind of won't matter, because there's always going to be there's a lot of internet training that you can go on, and for $49.99 you can do the cert. And I've taken a few of those myself just to get a feel for what for what's out there in the competition. And you go through the steps, but at the end of the day, it's more of a pencil whip than it is a learning.
Yeah, I think there's a way to be a lot more hands-on, or not necessarily obviously hands-on, but a lot more interactive with it, that I think is going to be a lot more productive, which I'm sure you're looking at. Yeah.
And I know personally, I realized that, man, I'm pretty good at studying for test responses, but it doesn't mean I know any of it.
Right.
And I can get 100% and get every question right. Then you ask me 5 minutes later, what'd you read? I don't have the foggiest idea. I knew that was a test. You know what I mean? You kind of lose the big picture, I guess.
Right.
And so my goal is to keep the highest possible standard, and to keep honest, open feedback coming in from students, and then respond appropriately, because things change, and what worked in one class may not work in another. So you got to kind of always be looking at what's new and what's available.
Yeah. So where do you see yourself kind of moving forward to? I mean, is it a situation where you're going to kind of stick with what your history has taught you as far as the trenching and shoring and the excavating, that kind of stuff, or do you see yourself kind of rounding this out and maybe bringing on staff and creating a whole curriculum to be a little bit more expansive to other trades, or sticking with the agency?
5 years I'd like to offer everything. I think there's so much instruction happening that's not top quality. I guess that's the politest way to put it.
Right.
I would like to see top quality instruction on all levels be available. And there's some of that curriculum I'm just not competent to instruct. Just some things I just haven't had any exposure to in my career, and it'd be ridiculous for me to try and open that that avenue up. I would need somebody that's more specialized in it, which would in turn create some opportunity for some growth for me and to bring some people on to help out. But we had when I was at Kitchell Contractors in Arizona, we had a project management software, and they rolled it out on like a Tuesday, and training was on Wednesday. So none of us had spent any time in the software. We'd never even turned it on yet because stuff hadn't been migrated over. So I was on a big project. We had a conference room that had, 70 seats or something available in it. So we were the hub. Everybody came to us for the people that weren't doing remote. We all walked into this room. Everybody's got their laptops. It's a software that nobody's seen before. So we're pretty raw, right? We don't know what questions to ask because we don't. Well, and you know how when you're in Excel and you can't find that button, the next time you go to Excel class, you're like, hey, where's that damn button? How do I do this function, right? Because it's something you're going to use. It's something it's a button that you're going to have to hit later, so it kind of sticks with you. And we sat down. It was 2 days. It was 16 hours of training, and this gal turned her computer.
Yeah.
Well, and this gal turned her computer on and read 2 days worth of PowerPoint.
Okay.
Just monologue across the top. It's like, oh my God. Oh, we were all looking at each other like, oh my God, just shoot me. And it was, the online training wasn't really that advanced yet. So there wasn't any good way to ask questions, but we didn't have any idea what she was talking about anyway, because nobody'd been,
you don't know where you don't
been
know.
in there.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, she probably did her best and did based on what her employer had directed her to do and how to go about it. But that just represents a lot of the training that's out there. And I've always been too busy to spend. I don't want to spend 16 hours and not get anything out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got I'll spend 16 hours to get 1 hour out of it. Right. Because sometimes some of the information you already know. So it's those couple of key, that's how that works. Or, that's how that fits together. I hadn't seen that before. It was pretty tough. And for me to jump into a class on that level and try and teach, I would have to do the same thing. I would have had to grab a PowerPoint and then read it. And it was pretty obvious that she had no familiarity with the system. She was just basically running through the functions and telling you how to do them. And so I would like to make sure that my training is never on that level. I want to provide the highest possible. I want people to walk out going, I'm smarter than I was when I walked in. And of course, the more senior the students are, the more difficult that task it becomes because they've got so much exposure to them. They've got these amazing microcomputers between their ears to use all that information that they've gained over the years. So that's, it's a fun challenge trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to find something about Mike insurance that Mike Fisher doesn't know and teach him something new today. Right. Because I've got to keep you engaged as well. Because what I found, and maybe the live classes kind of tunes you up for how to do an online class, because when somebody tunes out because the information is redundant, and there's nothing new to be learned or whatever it is, it tends to be problematic for the whole class.
Right.
And it's kind of one of those deals that just kind of spreads and more people tune out on you. So one of those skills that I get to bring to the online format, to the Zoom classes, kind of get a feel for when people are engaged and not engaged, and be able to keep them moving. Because I say, we're all too busy. We're all too busy to spend that much of our time if we're not going to get anything out of it.
Well, and Joe, I'm hearing your story, and thank God for Tom Murphy. I think it's ironic that you struggled through school, that you had to leave school early at his discretion, really, and to go out and join the military, and then get your hands dirty in the trades for quite a bit, and to come around and realize in the midst of that you are a great teacher.
All full circle, right?
Yeah. Totally ironic. But I'm hearing kind of, especially my father was in the military, was in the Navy for a long time, and Marine Corps as well. And, I know the dedication to excellence that comes about as a result of that. And so, I got to believe that, even though things are changing so rapidly with what's going on now, that we are exercising or having to exercise our creative part of our brains and to keep business and grow that business. At the same time, it's like anything, cream rises to the top. And as long as that dedication and that quality comes through and that excellence, it sounds like, especially for you, people are going to want to learn from you, like your buddy that was sitting trying to figure out how to contemplate 5/8 of an inch, and you just simply draw it out for him and see the joy in his face when he finally realizes it,
Well, no, it wasn't joy. It was pure disgust, because he was like, Americans are nuts. And it's just but it's changed my perspective on people in general. I'm kind of a study of people. I like to see how people react and what, I know what I said, but I can't be sure of what you've heard until you hear it come back to you. And you look at the industry, and you get into the engineer scale, everything's divisible by 10 and 100. And you see, my goodness, this is way easier to do in my head. If you tell me $8.95 minus $1.05, I don't have to go. And then you're looking at a 16th of an inch or a 32nd of an inch. It's like, wow, this is, it's just amazingly difficult. I have a whole nother level of empathy for people that are trying to learn that skill set.
Right, for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we want to thank you for joining us today and bringing on all the fun stories. I guess we want to also give you an opportunity to kind of plug your stuff here. Maybe find you a few more clients. Somebody's listening on here. So how how do the people here find you as far as if they're looking for some training or safety stuff?
saltsafetytraining.com, and they can get on there, and that's a link to either email or cell phone or message phone. Unfortunately, I'm a one-man shop at this point, so if I'm in the middle of a class, they'll have to leave a message, but they can send a text through, and then at a break I'll get back. And it seems like
Perfect.
Usually people want to schedule while you're in the middle of doing one.
It's kind of the way it works, right?
Yeah, they kind of clump together like that. But I'm available, and both numbers will follow me anywhere. So they can just reach out, and I'll get back to them.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Yeah, thanks again,
Thank
Joe.
you guys
We appreciate
very much
it. It's been awesome having you on. Yeah, we appreciate all the...
Man, I appreciate the opportunity to share my story. I lived it, so it means a lot to me, but it's been a fun ride. Construction's definitely provided and it's been fun for the last.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing. Like we were talking about kind of before we went live here, is that, it's such a diverse industry and so much room for opportunity and growth for anybody, really, that, that negative comment, not necessarily negative connotation, but that taboo that's kind of been put on it as like, oh, you're kind of lesser, you're kind of this, or you're kind of that. You're not the doctor, the lawyer, the dentist, anything else. You're the framer, you're the tile guy. But I mean, there's good money to be made, and there's quality people, and there's good businesses, and that's part of the reason why we're doing what we're doing here is kind of bringing that out and making that available for people to hear. And sharing the stories of how people like you, I mean, shoot, like you said, back in the 80s, would you ever thought that this would really be right now, teaching and being part of the growth of this industry on that end of it? I mean, it's just night and day difference.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys again. I really appreciate the opportunity. I look forward to listening to the rest of your podcast.
Yeah, thanks. We'll keep you updated, and maybe we'll get together when we're allowed to be social again. We'll get down to San Diego, get down that way.
All right, I like it.
Thanks, Joe. Have a good one.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening. And if you've made it this far, go ahead and give us a like or 5 stars or whatever means you like us.
Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode, and check out our website for more video content and extras.
While you're there, shoot us a message if you want to be a guest. We'd love to have you on.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.